Interior subway train. Day. Suddenly, Sam notices that something odd is happening. One of the riders at the other end of the car is walking toward him. With unholy fury, the new ghost charges into Sam.
Like trains!
With unexpected power, the ghost grabs hold of him and slams him into the subway door. Sam surges through the door at the end of the train. The subway ghost stares at him through the window with a wild, insane look.
Stay out! This is mine!
Ever since I first saw Ghost when I was young, I recognized this man as simply the subway ghost. Other people described him as the man with the sad eyes, but his actual name was Vincent Schiavelli, and for almost 40 years he was one of the busiest actors in the business. Known for his unique droopy face and tall, slender build, he has 157 credits to his name on IMDb. I can't tell you how many times I would see Vincent pop up in a movie. I always enjoyed him. And you know something? I don't think I ever saw him play the lead in a movie. He was a secondary character, but always managed to leave an impression. Vincent Schiavelli was born on November 11, 1948, to a Sicilian-American family in Brooklyn, New York. He grew up in an area he's described as Brusalino, an area of Brooklyn that was heavily populated by Italian immigrants who made their way to America at the turn of the century. He studied acting in a theater program at New York University and performed on stage throughout the 1960s. Now, before I get into Vincent's film and television roles, I want to focus on 3 certain qualities he had that I think may have helped him throughout his career. In episode 1, I talked about how Anne Ramsey was heavyset with a smoker's voice, and although it helped her fit certain roles, in the eyes of a casting director, it also must have limited her to all the other parts she could have easily played. Vincent, on the other hand, had qualities that not only helped him, but didn't necessarily limit him. First off, he suffered from a disease called Marfan syndrome. Marfan syndrome affects the heart. It pretty much weakens the tissue in the aorta, and over time, after all the blood pumping through it, it can eventually rupture and cause other complications. But the most visually noticeable symptom of Marfan syndrome is how it affects the skeleton. Those with the disease tend to have long faces and fingers and disproportionate limbs. At a height of 6'6", this is why Vincent looked the way he did. He's on record attributing his unique look to Marfan syndrome. As a result, Vincent already had an advantage when he went out for eccentric and unusual roles. Secondly, Vincent, born and bred in Brooklyn, New York to Sicilian immigrants, was also Italian, and looked Italian, rightfully so. He was also fluent in an old version of Sicilian, which he learned from his grandfather.
Chegou o momento de agir.
Lastly, there was Vincent's voice. Something about it always struck me. He had this smooth and calming tone to him that helped no matter what kind of character he played.
Rodney's the name. Solving mysteries my game.
If he was supposed to be friendly, it came off as warm and inviting.
Please, only positive energy allowed beyond this point.
I've been hearing fabulous things about the special. What, did we hit a little speed bump?
On the other hand, if his character was meant to give a feeling of unease, it was almost more effective.
Whoever you are, wherever you're from, greeting. Welcome to Minos, the arsenal of freedom, where we live by the motto, peace through superior firepower.
It's these 3 qualities that I think casting directors noticed the most. As a character actor, I think it's important to obviously have theatrical training and experience, as much as you can get, but it's the technical things that help as well. How you look, how you sound.
Which brings me back to one important quality I think every character actor should have, and that's self-awareness.
I think Vincent knew who he was, where he came from, how he looked, how he sounded, and that comes from experience. In my opinion, the more you get in front of a camera and the more you watch yourself in the final product, the more it helps you realize who you are and how other people perceive you. Vincent was successful in film and television from the very beginning. His first role ended up being a big one, a counselor in the 1971 Milos Forman film, Taking Off. His scene is probably the best one in the film, in which he teaches rich parents of runaway teens how to smoke weed so that they might better understand their troubled kids.
And as you inhale, curl up the edges of your mouth so that you let in a lot of oxygen, along with the smoke. It is very important to get a mixture of grass and oxygen.
This role would actually be the start of a frequent collaboration between Vincent and director Milos Forman, which I'll get into later. Oh, and one more thing, look what other character actor popped up in this movie.
Into a world full of angels and kings.
Yeah, that's a 23-year-old Kathy Bates. She was credited as Bobo Bates for some reason. The next project Vincent worked on immediately after taking off was a recurring character in a short-lived television show called The Corner Bar in 1972. First a movie, then a show? That's a great start to an acting career. Unfortunately, I can't find any footage of this show, but apparently Vincent's character, Peter Panama, was notable for being the first openly gay character on television. That's pretty cool.
In 1975, Vincent played Fredrickson, just one of many mental patients in the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, directed by Milos Forman. A little tangent here, but this film is packed full of character actors, many of whom probably consider this movie their first big break. I guess if you make a movie that takes place in a mental asylum, you're going to have some unique-looking characters. Besides Vincent Schiavelli, there's Danny DeVito, Christopher Lloyd, Sidney Lassick, even Brad Dourif, aka the voice of Chucky. All these guys, including Vincent, were amazing in this movie, and they all went on to have long, healthy careers as character actors. And every once in a while, Milos Forman would come back to them to cast them in his projects, or work with them in another capacity. For example, Forman directed Man on the Moon, produced by and co-starring Danny DeVito, with Vincent Schiavelli and Sidney Lassick showing up in supporting roles, and Christopher Lloyd appeared playing himself. No actor worked more with Forman than Vincent Schiavelli, though. He was already in Taking Off, and after Cuckoo's Nest, Forman directed him in Amadeus.
Signore, if you don't open this door, we're gonna eat everything and we're gonna leave nothing for you. And I'm never gonna come and see you again.
Valmont.
She... Just resting, sir. Just resting. Shall I? No.
The People vs. Larry Flint.
Hey, Larry, come on, man. Move over.
And Man on the Moon.
The viewer must be able to see the program.
This is a great example of when a director obviously enjoyed working with an actor, knows his or her strengths, and keeps them in mind for future projects or business ventures. Same thing with Danny DeVito and Vincent Schiavelli. I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty certain these two were friends, because they were consistently popping up in projects together. Although this is Hollywood, so just because they worked together a lot doesn't mean they were friends, but look at this. There's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which they both acted in. Then a year later, DeVito wrote and directed a short film called The Selling of Vince D'Angelo and cast Vincent as a thug. They were both in the Gong Show movie. Then Danny DeVito had his series regular role on Taxi, where Vincent Schiavelli had a recurring character as the priest who married Latka and Simca. They both appeared in Johnny Dangerously, Batman Returns, Man on the Moon, which DeVito produced, and Death to Smoochie, which DeVito directed.
Want a drink, Buggy? Vodka. I do this thing tonight, and the spot is mine, right? With a bow on it.
That's 8 projects where they ended up working together. Maybe some of the earlier projects were coincidence, but it seems like DeVito just really liked Vincent and wanted to work with him, especially later on when he really took off as a director and producer and probably had more clout. 25 years of history has to account for something. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Vincent made appearances on almost every popular show on television. You got Starsky and Hutch, WKRP in Cincinnati, Taxi, Cagney and Lacey, Night Court, Moonlighting, Punky Brewster, Who's the Boss? The list goes on. Even if his film career had completely come to an end, he would have made a healthy living just doing guest appearances on TV. As for film, the next big project he worked on was Fast Times at Ridgemont High as Mr. Vargas, the biology teacher.
And here is the human heart, which you can see is actually located in the center of your chest.
Oh, gnarly!
This is a role he would actually play again 4 years later when Universal tried their best to make a television adaptation of the same movie called Fast Times. It only lasted 7 episodes. In 1985, he also played a geometry teacher in the classic 80s movie Better Off Dead.
Mr. Meyer! Please join us at the blackboard and show us your solution to this paltry geometric dilemma.
In 1990, Vincent played the Subway Ghost in the Academy Award-winning film Ghost. Everyone's probably familiar with this movie, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the plot. Patrick Swayze plays Sam, who's murdered in the first 10 minutes, becomes a ghost, and with the help of a clairvoyant, he's trying to figure out who murdered him and why. As Sam is chasing a suspect onto a subway train, he's confronted by another ghost, Vincent Schiavelli, who seemingly haunts the subway tunnels. But this ghost somehow has the ability to interact with physical objects. At a later point, Sam decides to go back to the subway and confront the ghost, asking him to teach him how to do it.
What are you doing? What the hell you doing? You trying to move it with your finger.
You can't push it with your finger. You're dead.
You ain't got a body no more, son. It's all up here now. You want to move something, you got to move it with your mind.
I love the ghost's explanation of how to use this power.
How did you do that?
You gotta take all your emotions, all your anger, all your love, all your hate, and push it way down here into the pit of your stomach, and then let it explode like a reactor.
I like to think that he spent years alone as this lost soul, haunting subway cars, and had enough time on his hands to figure out how to do this and get better at it. He probably freaked people out all the time, and maybe passengers would hear rumors never to ride one particular line because weird stuff happens. There's a lot of depth to this role, and the movie in general. Vincent's character is a perfect portrayal of a soul that's been wandering the earth for way too long. He's quick to rage, has some weird mood swings, and seems to be at a point where he's not really sure what's reality and what's not. I like to think that Sam sees a bit of himself in the subway ghost. Like, if he ends up a ghost forever, he could end up like this guy, living in a limbo of sorts, tortured, angry, and afraid. It's awesome. I'd like to say that this role gave Vincent his big break and he worked more than he ever did, but really, when you look at it, he just continued working a lot like he did before. His workload didn't really get lighter or heavier. I mean, I'm sure he got some parts here and there because casting directors were more aware of him, but I don't know. I get the feeling that even if he was never in Ghost, his career would have been just fine. Ah, the 90s. Vincent continued to appear in every television show you've ever seen. Erie, Indiana, Tales from the Crypt, Highlander, The X-Files, Baywatch Nights, although I guess nobody really saw that, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Dharma and Greg, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the list, again, goes on. This was also the decade that Vincent, thanks to his unique voice, got into voiceover work, popping up in shows like Real Monsters,
Now, with the help of the beautiful Tiffany,
and Hey Arnold.
There's a Christmas party down the hall. Go, have some eggnog.
The 90s also brought with them a new generation of video games, which Vincent also dabbled in. You can hear him in Blade Runner for the PC.
That a 45 blaster under your coat, or you're just happy to be here?
And you can see him in full motion video in Lands of Lore, Guardians of Destiny.
I beg your pardon, sir. I need your help. I carry a curse made of ancient magic.
I doubt that, son. But tell me, what fable of ancient glory directed you all the way here?
And Emperor Battle for Dune.
Why are you hovering there, Mentat? Step forward. What have you brought me?
It is the replacement you requested, my Lord Baron.
Doesn't look like much.
I never played any of these games, but I did play SSX Tricky for the PlayStation 2, and I remember Vincent making a small cameo. In the game, one of the techno songs in the background as you play was called Move It With Your Mind, and they sampled some audio from Ghost.
It's all in your mind.
Also, before we close out the 90s, I think his role as Dr. Kaufman in Tomorrow Never Dies deserves an honorable mention.
I have a clear shot at your head, Mr. Bond. Stand up, slowly, drop your gun and kick it toward me, yeah?
As we get into the 2000s, you might notice on Vincent's IMDb page that he started to work less, and the projects he did work on were a little more Italian. Now, why is that? The answer to that question lies in a documentary called Once Upon a Time in Polizzi.
In 2004, character actor Vincent Schiavelli decided to leave his Hollywood life and move to a small town in Sicily, the town which his grandparents had left a century earlier for Brooklyn, New York. This is the first year in Vincent's new Sicilian life.
First of all, Schiavelli? I guess that's how it's properly pronounced in Italian, and I've just been saying it wrong. Second of all, you heard it right. In 2004, Vincent moved permanently to a small Sicilian town called Polizzi Generosa. In this documentary, he tells stories of his childhood growing up in Brooklyn, his family, his grandfather who taught him how to speak Sicilian and also taught him old Italian recipes that he knew. And that's a big focus of the documentary: food. Vincent loved food, especially Italian food. His passion for food and the Italian culture comes across so much in this film.
Secondo te che cos'è?
Bello. Un cigno.
Un cigno bianco. Vuoi che li facciamo nell'acqua? Ok.
Ok.
E ora posiamo i cigni.
Swan Lake.
La danza dei cigni.
Sì, la danza del cigno che muore.
Muore. Okay.
I also learned that Vincent had been a writer for years. Since 1993, he had been writing books, all true stories and anecdotes from his childhood and adulthood, all having something to do with the town of Polizzi Generosa. And because Italian food is supposedly so intertwined with the Italian culture, after every short story you read, there's a recipe for a meal that was somehow included in the story. For example, in one story, he talks about when he was a boy, his grandfather didn't come home one night from the local club. Worried, he and his aunt went to the club to make sure he was okay, and he found his grandfather staying late cooking veal cutlets for all of his friends. On the next page, bam, the recipe for the very same veal cutlets that his grandfather was cooking over 50 years ago. And you can cook it yourself. What a great way to immerse yourself into a story. It'd be cool if movies did that. Like, what if you could eat the exact same dish that Paulie was cooking everyone in Goodfellas when they were in prison? The way he talks about how the garlic is cut so thin it melts into the pan. It sounds so good. And hey, look on the back of these books that Vincent wrote. Glowing reviews from Danny DeVito. One thing that was certain from watching this documentary was that Vincent, late in his life, was getting back in touch with his roots. It seemed to be a fixation for him. He looks so happy, he's just smiling the whole time. I love that laugh. You know, I gotta say, Vincent's career as an actor is definitely fascinating to me, but what surprised me when I was making this episode was how much more I was interested in all this. I loved this documentary. I've watched it 4 times. I could have watched 5 hours of this. I didn't want it to end. I wish I could just edit in the entire documentary for you to watch, but that'd just be stupid. Vincent has such a charm and wit about him, such charisma, that whenever he was telling a story, I was captivated. And after reading Vincent's books, I realized why I was more fascinated with Vincent's obsession with Polizzi, and that's because it seemed to mean more to him than anything else, including his acting career. In his book Many Beautiful Things, he says, "As years passed, Polizzi Generosa became to me more mythic than real. I could never find it on any map. College, relationships, working as an actor in Los Angeles, and all the other joys and responsibilities of life served to postpone a Sicilian quest." You know, after reading that, I realized that I did this whole episode wrong. With this in mind, I'd like to start over from the beginning. Vincent Andrew Schiavelli was born in Brooklyn, Brucelino, New York, to his father, Pascal Giovanni Schiavelli, and his mother, Katie Schiavelli, formerly Katie Coco. As a boy, Vincent grew very close with his grandfather, Papa Andrea Coco, his mother's father. He loved his family more than anything, and he enjoyed sitting at the kitchen table and hearing everyone exchange stories about a magical, far-off place called Polizzi Generosa. His grandfather Andrea, speaking in a lost, archaic version of Sicilian, would teach Vincent all of his secret Italian recipes. Later in his life, Vincent made a living as an actor in film and television. Through his work, he met his first wife, actress Alice Beasley, and had one son with her, whom he named Andrea, presumably after his grandfather. The two divorced in 1988. He married a second time the same year to a professional harpist, Carol McCallion. Shortly after their wedding, Vincent traveled with Carol to visit Polizzi for the very first time. He instantly fell in love with the city described by his family for years. Over the years, the visits to Polizzi grew more and more frequent. In 2001, Vincent's mother Katie passed away, along with all of his aunts and uncles. Vincent would cite this year as an important catalyst in his decision to finally give in to his passion for Polizzi and move there permanently in 2004.
In 2001, my entire family died. My aunts and uncles, my mother, they all died in 2001, between January and November. An entire generation, which was the glue that held our family together.
There, he met and fell in love with another woman, Katia, and spent the rest of his days in Polizzi, acting with her in plays he had written, eating and drinking with good friends, laughing, telling stories, telling jokes, sharing old recipes from his grandfather. The distant fantasy of his childhood had finally become a reality. On December 26, 2005, Vincent Schiavelli died of lung cancer in Polizzi Generosa at the age of 57. He was buried at Polizzi Generosa Cemetery in Palermo, Sicily. His tombstone reads, in Italian, "When a great artist lives inside a big man, his soul will remain eternal."
you do that? You gotta take all your emotions, all your anger, all your love, all your hate, and push it way down here into the pit of your stomach. And then let it explode like a reactor.
As I mentioned in my episode on character actor Vincent Schiavelli, Vincent loved Italian cooking. Growing up in an area he's described as Brusolino, a pocket of Brooklyn, New York inhabited by a large number of Italian immigrants, Vincent developed a love for food from his grandfather, Papa Andrea Coco. I argued that Vincent's passion for food and Italian culture outweighed his passion for acting. Well, I didn't realize how much it did. I thought he just wrote a few books here and there in between acting jobs, but check this out. In the About the Author section of his book, Many Beautiful Things, it says that Vincent wrote articles about Sicilian cuisine for numerous publications, several of which won various awards. He was a guest chef at cooking schools throughout the country. He's done cooking demonstrations on Regis and Kathy Lee and Good Morning America. He was the host of The Chefs of Cucina Amore, a 26-episode cooking series for PBS. He was the co-producer and host of another cooking show called La Bella Vita, and 4 of the episodes were filmed in Polizzi Generosa. He was a member of the International Association of Culinary Professionals and a founding member of the Hollywood Convivium of Slow Food. And as it says in the book, in his other career, he was a character actor. In celebration of Vincent's work as a chef, as well as his love for Italian food and culture, I decided to enlist the help of a friend of mine, Christian Leiva, a professional chef, to cook 3 recipes from Vincent's book, Brusolino America. Each dish he cooked had some tie-in to Vincent's life. Here's what happened.
My name's Christian Leiva. I've been a chef for about 11 years now, professionally. I am currently a chef for private jets out of Van Nuys, California. And yeah, that's what I do. Cooking has always been a big part of my family. Since I was little, my mom was always in the kitchen, and I was always the nosy one in there and trying to try things and just, driving her nuts. But for me, it's just, it was so second nature to me. It's something I love to do, and figured, if I loved it so much, why not do it as a profession?
All right, so we are on our way to Super King, this Mexican-Armenian store nearby in the valley. And they will have specialty items there. We're going to go there first and go to Ralph's. So we're cooking Italian food today. Is there anything special about Italian food going into these dishes that we're cooking?
Well, Italian food, I mean, you always want to cook with a lot.
What was that?
I have no idea.
All right.
It's Vincent. He does not want me to f up this food. They're very traditional. They're very rustic. The ingredients are really simple. But I think that's what speaks on the time of when he created these recipes.
Right under the pork there, 1 can tomato paste. Oh yeah, we need the 4.5 pounds of the rice. Yeah, arborio. There it is. Alrighty.
Well, no, we got one more stop.
One more stop.
And with Italian food, it's always been about family. Always been about gathering people together, having everybody at the same table, which is something that I think a lot of us are actually missing these days. I think these recipes are just they're incredible. I mean, they're simple, but you do taste the difference between something that a recipe that is from a hometown, whether it be small or big, but it's not been bastardized while being shipped or being cooked here in America.
Okay, so we've chosen 3 dishes to cook. The first one is sort of our appetizer, stuffed zucchini. One of several side dishes on our Easter table, as well as on many other Sundays throughout the warmer months of the year, was stuffed zucchini. And while we're cooking in here, we have sort of a montage of Vincent Schiavelli's scenes from different films and television that he's done. This is him in Star Trek. I got Ghost in there, I got the Once Upon a Time in Polizzi documentary, I've got Man on the Moon. So it's almost like Vincent is here with us in spirit, in a way. What are you doing? Trying to cook something? You can't cook something, you're dead. You think you're standing here? You think you're reading that book? You want to cook something, you gotta cook it with your mind. Oh no. There we go. Did I do it right? No?
No, that's not it.
Not it.
That's not it. Almost.
All right, that's okay. Some Just like that?
Just like that.
There we go, I can do that.
Its delicate texture complements roasted or grilled meat dishes. It may also be served as an appetizer. The cheese used in the stuffing, ricotta salata, a pressed ewe's milk ricotta, is easily found in Italian markets and specialty food shops. The cheese is made in several textures. For this recipe, the moister kind is best. For our main dish, this is the showstopper here. This is tumala de Andrea. And tumala was my grandfather's signature dish. As a boy, I watched from the other end of the kitchen table as he prepared it. As a teenager, I helped. As an adult, I have prepared tumala many times, and over the years, its magnificence has awed my guests.
I guess a good way to think about this dish, and we'll put a picture up real quick of what it's supposed to look like, is it's a bunch of meat and pasta and some veggies inside of a shell of rice. Like the rice is supposed to be hardened to the point where it's like just a layer around, and inside is this delicious mixture of meat. All right, so this is the moment. We took it out of the oven, and at this part of the recipe, you know, it's done, but we need to flip it over onto probably this plate here. Oh man.
Ready for this?
Yep. Let's see, it's steaming. Wow! There it is. This video would have been awful if that hadn't worked. All right, cut into it here. It's like cutting into a cake.
Inside, ready?
Okay, so that's our main dish, and then for dessert, we have lemon ice. The lemon ice we ate in Brusolino was different in texture from the Sicilian kind. In Sicily, it was more like a grated ice drink than a solid frozen dessert. In an effort to turn Mr. Circo's product, Mr. Circo was the owner of a store where Vincent would walk and buy the lemon ice in the hot summers of New York and Brooklyn. In an effort to turn Mr. Circo's product into the real thing, we ate it out of tall glasses, hoping that the heat of our hands would turn it into the granular delight of my grandparents' memory. Looks good, and it is a very, very hot day today. So this lemon ice is gonna be nice, I think.
Well, this is it, man. You did it.
Yeah.
We did it. I helped a little bit. You did most of the work, which I'm glad because it looks amazing. So first, we have the zucchini, the stuffed zucchini. That's delicious. You sprinkle a little bit of cheese. I like that. Let's try the tumala. That's so good. That's good.
Soft, crunchy.
I like the textures
salty.
too.
Yeah, absolutely delicious.
And this is our dessert. We got the lemon ice. It's melting a little bit, so it's more of a little cocktail almost. But
cheers.
Cheers. It's the right amount of sugary and sour. And I like the little touch of the raspberries and the mint. That was good.
Yeah, a little chocolate mint, frozen to keep it cold. Especially in summer days in Sicily, it'd be really, really intense.
Yeah.
So,
cool, man. Well, yeah, we're gonna finish our dinner. We got some cigars here.
Okay.
Vincent Schiavelli's grandfather and Vincent himself would like to go to these clubs in Brooklyn, New York, and just play cards all day and smoke cigars. So we got a couple cigars for that, and we got some Italian wine that you got. And yeah.
So
here's to
drinking. Yeah, good drinking.
Here's to Vincent Schiavelli and his grandfather, Papa Andrea Coco. Thank you for the recipes.
And buon appetito.
Buon appetito.
We're actually adding a little micro basil. The micro basil should give it a nice little flavor. Once you're cutting, you should be able to get a piece of this.
Oh, I'm Leiva. I'm a chef. It's really hard, you know. Just go cut zucchini here. It's really hard.